Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So, the plan for today is we're going to make our level select. So we need to be able to choose at the beginning of the game from a selection of different backdrops and platforms. And we also want to make sure that the game doesn't start until we have selected our level. And we want to make a system where we can add more levels later if we want to. So, let's get to the code. So first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure we click on the stage and then click up here on backdrops. Now I've got a bunch of different backdrops. We want to make sure that we have maybe 2 or 3 of these kind of backdrops here. So I've got slopes, I've got Night City. Let's add a new one. What about Space City 2? Let's try that. Yep, I like these as 3 different options. Now what we need to do is we need to choose a backdrop for our level select screen. Now you can just draw like a big square if you want of just one color. I'm actually going to choose the stars backdrop, and I'm going to make sure that we rename this costume as level select. Now what we need to do is we need to get our slopes, our Night City, and our Space City, and they can be different backdrops if you want to choose different ones. We need to rename them so that they are level 1, level 2, and level 3. And we also need to make sure that they are in order 1, 2, and 3 at the top of our list of costumes. So drag them around until they're in the right order and they're named correctly. Then we're going to go back to the code. We're going to make sure that we start the game on the right backdrop. So we should already have this when green flag clicked, switch backdrop to level 1. If you don't, just put that code in now. And then grab this. We want to change this to switching the backdrop to level select at the beginning of the game. Now what we need is we need some way of all of our different sprites knowing when we have proceeded from the level select part of the game to the actual playing the game. And to do this, we are going to use something called a state machine. Now, a state machine, in this case, is going to be a variable, and that variable is going to track the state of our game. And you can make state machines for all sorts of things. So here's a picture, for example, of Mario. If you've ever played a Mario game, you know that if you are little Mario and you eat a mushroom, you become Big Mario. If you eat then a fire plant, you become Fire Mario. If you take damage, you go from Super Mario back to just normal small Mario again. We would use something like a state machine to track the state of Mario. So we might have like Mario state as our variable, and inside that we would have like Little Mario, Super Mario, Fire Mario, and other different types of Marios. Now, for our game, we're not going to make a Mario character state machine. We're going to make a state machine that keeps track of the state of our game. So remember, we're just going to use a variable for our state machine. So click on Variables, click on Make a Variable, and we're going to call this variable Game State. Then press OK, and we're going to set the game state at the beginning of the game. Set game state, and we're going to set it to level select. Now, whatever word or words we put into this game state variable is going to let the rest of our code know what they should be doing or not doing, depending on what state the game is in. Now, we need to make another variable to keep track of what level we have selected. So let's click on Make a Variable. Let's call this level. Let's press OK. So now we're going to make it so that our stage, our backdrops, are going to wait until we've selected our level, and then they're going to change to the backdrop of the level that we selected. Let's go to Control. Let's look for Wait Until. Drag that out. And we want to wait until the game state is not level select, but playing, as in we're playing the game. So go to Operators, because we're going to need an equals operator. Drag this one out. Now we want to be checking our variable, our game state variable, and just type into here, playing. Now it's important that each time you type these in, you spell it correctly, because other sprites are going to be checking to see if the word is the word they expect it to be, and computers don't know how to spell check, or at least the code that we're putting in is not going to be spell checking you, so it needs you to spell it correctly each time. And Scratch may or may not care about capitalization, but probably just make sure the capitalization is also the same. So if you use a capital P here, make sure you use a capital P everywhere else in your code when you write down playing. So now our backdrops are just going to wait until the game state has been set to playing, but then after that, we need to make sure that they change the backdrop. So let's go to Looks, let's get out Switch Backdrop, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to our variables and get out our level variable. So whatever number this becomes, either 1, 2, or 3, it will change to costume 1, 2, or 3. Let's give that a test. So at the beginning of the game, we should have now this stars backdrop, that level select backdrop. One thing I'm going to do actually, just quickly, is I am going to go into the backdrops, and with our level select, I'm just going to write some white letters into the phrase select level, just so it's a bit more obvious what's going on. Yep, I like that. That's good. So what next? Let's make some new platforms. So click on your platform sprite. Let's click on costumes, and let's duplicate this costume. Let's use the select tool to select all of these shapes. Let's just change the color to a red. And now we can be a bit creative. Let's move around some of the platforms, see what kind of different levels we can make. So as you can see, I've made 3 different levels, 3 different colors. So you can feel free to design these the way that you would like to. And if you need some ideas, then what I recommend is you just type Super CrateBox levels into a Google image search, and then you can have a look at all of these different shapes and be like, oh, maybe I could make something a little bit like that. Another thing to make sure is that you've left a good gap. If you are going to be rearranging any of the gaps, make sure the enemies can still fit through. If it's too narrow, the enemies can get stuck. And if you notice the enemies getting stuck, like not being able to fit through the gap, just widen the gaps up a little bit, and that should fix the problem. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that they are all named correctly. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, and that they're also arranged in the right order. 1, 2, then 3. Let's go back to the code. So now we need to make sure that the platform sprite switches its costume depending on which level we selected. And at the beginning of the game, we don't want the platforms to appear at all. So let's, at the beginning of the game, set the level selected to level 0. Let's get out our set. We're going to set the level variable to 0 at the beginning of the game. Then let's go to control and get out a forever loop. In this forever loop, let's put an if, then, else. So get out if, then, else. And this first section here will be if we want the platforms to be invisible. So let's go to operators. Let's get out an equals operator. Then go to variables, because we want to check to see what level has been selected. We'll get out level. And if the level is 0, we'll just make the platforms hide themselves. So go to looks and get out a hide. So now at the beginning of the game, the platforms should disappear and everything's falling through, which is very funny. Then, once we have selected a level, we want to make sure that the platforms switch to the correct costume. So first of all, we need to make sure that we show, put that underneath the else. So if the level is not 0, we're going to show, and then we're going to switch our costume to whatever the level variable says. So let's go to variables and get out level, and now once we switch this level variable to 1, 2, or 3, we should switch the costume to costume 1, 2, or 3. So as you saw before, now when we start the game in our select level screen, our player is still being spawned and can still move, we can still shoot, and all of our enemies and our crate are just falling infinitely through the level. We want to make sure that all of these sprites Don't do this until the game state has gone from level select to playing. So we're going to make some code, and then we're going to transfer that to the player, the weapon, the enemy, and the crate. And let's go to the player to start off with, and let's look for when green flag clicked. Now, the code that we're going to need to make it so that all of these sprites wait until the game state says playing, it looks a bit like this. First of all, we should make them hide themselves so that we can't see them when we're on the level select screen. So go to looks, get out a hide. While we're here, we're going to need to make them show again once we have moved from game state level select to game state playing. So let's get out a show. Just put this right here because we need to put some stuff in between them. Now we're going to go to control, and we're going to need to get out a wait. Get out a wait and put it underneath the hide, and change this wait 1 second into a wait 0 seconds. Now, the reason that we put in a wait 0 seconds is to prevent some bugs and glitches. It's basically a way of making sure that the player, the weapon, the enemy, everything just waits until they can be certain that the game state variable has been updated. Because, as we all know, sometimes the variable was set to something else at the end of last game, and it can take just a tiny split second to update properly. That's what this wait 0 seconds is all about. And that's a very small amount of time. You won't even notice it's there. Don't worry too much. The main reason we have this is to prevent glitches. Then we're going to get out a wait until. And we're going to wait until our game state is playing. So as before, we're going to go to operators. We're going to need an equals operator. We're going to go to variables, get out a game state variable. And we want to wait until the game state is playing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get our show, put that on the bottom, and this whole piece of code, before we do anything else with it, let's copy it across to our weapon, our enemy, and our crate. So all we need to do is drag the whole piece of code and then drop with our mouse on the weapon, and then do the same thing for the enemy, and the same thing for the crate. Once you've done that, this whole piece of code needs to go right underneath when green flag clicked, and this is in the player. So let's test it to see if the player is invisible at the beginning of the game. Yes, the player is invisible, but other things are not. So let's go to weapon, and let's get out our hide. It should be somewhere here, and we're going to drag that underneath when green flag clicked. It should just go in above all the other code. Then let's do the same thing with the crate. Oh, yep, there it is. Let's get out our hide and put it right underneath when green flag clicked. Then we're going to go to our enemy. Now, an interesting thing about our enemy, once you find the when green flag clicked, is that the main enemy sprite is always hidden, because only the clones show themselves, if you remember how we made the enemy. So we actually don't need the hide, and we don't need the show. All we need is the wait 0 seconds, and wait until game state equals playing. Let's put that right underneath the hide. It shouldn't matter too much, but let's put it right here. Now the important thing is, this wait until. This is going to prevent any of the code underneath it from working until our game state goes from level select to playing. So that's the next thing we should do. But first, let's give it a test. We start the game and excellent. There are no enemies, no sprites, none of our controls do anything because all of our sprites, all of our code is waiting until this game state changes. Now, the next step is we need to make our actual select level buttons. So let's hover over here and select paint a new sprite. So we should have a blank sprite here. We're going to call this sprite level select. And then we're going to go to our backdrops, and just drag our backdrops across. So level 1, drag that across to our level select sprite and then let go. Then the same with backdrop 2, level 2, and the same with level 3. And if you have more ones, then feel free to drag those across as well. So now we should have 3 different costumes and a blank one. We can get rid of that blank one, so now we've got level 1, level 2, and level 3. Now let's go back to the code, because what we want to have happen is we want these to be a lot smaller, so that they're like little buttons, and you can click on which level you would like to play. So let's go to Events, get out a When Green Flag Clicked, and make sure that this sprite is a bit smaller. So first off, let's go to Looks and get out a Set Size. I'm going to set my size to about 30%. You can change this later. Actually, let's try 25%, a bit smaller. Then we need to make sure that we start off on level 1. So get out a Switch Costume to level 1. Now what we're going to do is hide this sprite, because we're going to make 3 different clones, 1 for each of the levels. So let's get out a hide, put that at the top, and now let's decide on a starting position. So let's go to motion, let's get out a go to X and Y, and let's say we're going to start off on minus 140, let's say, and let's say Y is minus 50. You can change these numbers if you like. This is just a good place to start, I think, for us. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Control and get out a repeat. Let's get out a repeat 10. How many levels do we have? We've got 3. So we want to make 3 clones. Get out a create clone of myself, and then get out a when I start as clone, and we want to make sure that the clones show themselves. So let's go to Looks and get out a show. So let's hit test, and you should find now that there are exactly 3 clones of the level select button. Now, of course, when you start, they're all stacked on top of each other. But if you click and drag them around, you'll find that there are 3 of them. So let's make sure that each of these buttons moves to the right, like that. So let's go to motion and get out a change X. Put that underneath our create clone. And let's just see what that looks like. Okay, well, you can now see that there are 3 very close to each other. So let's increase this, shall we? Shall we say 50? Okay, now there are 3 and they're much more separated. Let's go 140. There we go. Got this one here, and this one here. Now they're all the same level, so we need to make sure that they're choosing a new costume. So let's go to Looks and get out Next Costume. Let's put that on the bottom and click that. Now we've got our 3 different level buttons. So now we need to make it so that when we click these buttons, we change the game state. So let's go to Events. Let's get out a when this sprite is clicked. Then let's go to Variables and get out a set game state to playing. Okay, let's give that a test, shall we? Let's hit go. And when we click one of these buttons, the game starts playing. Excellent. Now what we need to do is make sure that we're actually changing the level. So let's, as a test, get out a set level to 1. And let's give that a test. So now when we click this one, we've selected level 1. But here's the problem. If we click this one, it's also selected level 1. And if we click this one, it's also selected level 1. So we need a way for each of these different buttons to select a different level. Let's use a local variable for this. Click on Make a Variable. Make sure that you click for this sprite only. And we're going to call this Index. Now, don't worry too much about what this word means. Index is just a useful word that we use when we have lots of copies of something and we want each of those copies to have a different number. So press OK, and you'll see that you've got level select index. And remember, this is a local variable, so all of them are going to have a different version of the variable. So we're going to set the index to start off at 1. So let's get out a set index to 1 at the beginning of the game. And then we want to make sure that each time we make a clone, we increase the index by 1. So let's get out a change index by 1. And let's put that right at the bottom of our repeat 3. What we need to do now is when we click on a sprite, we're going to set the level not to 1, but we're going to set it to whatever the index is of these 3 clones. And if we want to make certain, let's just get out a say block. Let's put that in our when I start as clone, and we're just going to get out our index variable. We're going to say index. So now you can see that this index is 1, this index is 2, and this index is 3. That's just like a little test to make sure the code is working. We don't need this say index anymore, but let's get this index variable, put it set level to index. We get rid of this say, we don't need it anymore. So now when we start the game, when we click this button here, we're going to set the game state to playing, and we're going to set the level to 1. Now if we start the game again and we click this button here, now we're in level 2, and all of the code that we made to change the backdrop and the platforms is working just like we wanted it to. Now let's try it again, and we click this one, and now we're in level 3. Now, obviously there's a problem. These 3 buttons are still here, and they're in the way, and you can even do some weird things by changing the level as you're playing it. So let's fix that. Let's go and find when I start as clone, and then let's put a wait until game state equals playing. So we'll go to our wait until. We're going to get out an equals. We're going to get out our game state variable, and we're going to wait until the game state is playing, just to make sure that we don't get any glitches. Let's put another wait 0 seconds on top of that wait until. And after the game state is playing, we want to make sure that they delete themselves. So let's get out delete this clone and put it underneath our wait until game state equals playing. So now if we hit go and we click this, all of them should disappear. And they do. Excellent. So you can see how now our game state is now set to playing. When we start, it's set to level select, and all of our different sprites can look at this state machine and make different decisions and behave differently depending on what word or words are inside this variable. And that's all a state machine is, but it's very, very useful. So at this point, we can hide some of these variables. We shouldn't need them anymore. Go to variables, click on index. We don't need to see the index. We probably don't need to see the game state, but if you're ever having problems with your game, it's a good idea to tick this game state to see what game state you're in. And we don't need to see what level we're in either. Now, if you want to make more than 3 levels, here's something that will help you do that. Let's click on make a variable, and let's make a variable called number of levels. Then press OK. And we're going to set our number of levels to 3. And this repeat 3 down here, we can put in our number of levels variable. So now, if you want to make a new backdrop, level 4, and a new platform, level 4, you can do that, and then you just need to go to our level select, and you need to change where it says set number of levels to 3, into 4. Now, the other thing you would need to do is you would need to change this, change x by 140. You would need to make this a smaller number if you wanted to add in more levels. Perhaps you could even do something very clever using some maths to divide up the amount of space you have to work with into the number of buttons you need to make. You could also do something clever by having 2 rows of buttons. Have a bit of an experiment. Try some of the operators, maybe the divide by operator to divide up the space. Try maybe changing the y after a certain index if you want 2 different rows. If you're really interested, let me know in the comments, and I'll add in a new tutorial of how to increase your levels even further in your level select screen. Oh, and of course, you might want to also reduce the size a little bit on your buttons. Now, there's one last thing that is quite fun, that is completely optional if you don't want to do it, and I don't recommend you do it until you're really happy with your platforms. But if you go to your platform sprite, and then you use the select tool to drag over all of the platforms, if you press Control C, then go to your level select, and Control V, you'll now have all of your platforms pasted over the top of your level 1. Let's try doing the same thing for level 2. Level 2, Control C, which as we know is copy. Let's click on level select, go to level 2, Control V, which as we know is paste. Then let's do the same thing for level 3, select it all, Control C, and level 3, Control V. There we go. So now, when we have our level select, we can see what the platforms look like. That's all we've got time for today. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to see the next episode, and let me know in the comments what you would like me to do next, or if you need any help. I can't answer the comments like I used to, but if you're an experienced coder, see if you can leave a comment to help people who are asking questions. Aside from that, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, Ninjas.